Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm so glad to see so many people here. This is fantastic. We're gonna talk a lot tonight about a very popular subject at dinner parties that make me always the funnest person to invite, abortion. And it is a difficult subject. The first thing I would like to say before I begin my remarks and before we open up the room for Q&A is that we know that there are probably men and women here suffering from an abortion decision that you have made, and that there is help for you. And if there is someone you would like to speak to about that, about feelings that you may have, regret you may have, you can ask the pro-life group here at BC, or you can speak with me or someone from our team at Students for Life, or you can just simply Google post-abortion help. So I want to thank everyone for coming out. I want to thank the police officers, the school, and the administration for making all the special accommodations. Especially today on the St. Joseph's feast day. I'm a convert to Catholicism, so I never use like the right words perfectly. But today it was pretty special because it is the feast day of St. Joseph. I want to thank my husband, who will probably watch this later, who's at home right now with our 4 children, and literally makes everything that I do possible because of the man that he is. A little bit about myself, to tell you, kind of where I came from. I grew up in a small town in West Virginia. I was raised by my parents, and I lived with my parents my whole life until I left for college, and my sister lived with us. My father came from an interesting childhood. He was raised by his mostly single mom. He never went to college. He wanted to work right when he graduated high school into a job that he pretty much hated, a blue-collar job, for about 40 years until he retired last year, thankfully. My mom grew up in a great family and went to college, and they met in high school, and we're together ever since. And when I kind of look back at my life, and why I am the way I am, and you can ask people who work for me, it's usually a very interesting question. I always think about my dad, and I think about the way I grew up in my family, because that's how I was shaped, how I was raised, and how I was formed. And I think about, these long conversations my dad and I would have. It's kind of like a dad conversation. So it's a long conversation, but it's like a sentence here and like 10 minutes later, another sentence. But he was kind of my main driver. He was the person, the parent who showed up at all my basketball games or my volleyball games and drove me around to all my sports. And he was the person always telling me to strive for the best, to be the best, to give it 100% in everything I did. A good example of my childhood was in first grade. I got a B on a math quiz, like a little math test. I mean, the grades don't really matter in first grade, but I had to go back to school the next day and ask for extra credit to get that up to an A. So that's a little bit of my dad. And the reason he would say, especially in high school when he was always pushing me, the reason he would say, you have to be the best, you have to do the best, is because he wanted choices for my life. Choices that he felt he never had. Going to college, not going to college, he just got the first job out of high school, and he was able to work through his way up to eventually being boss by the time he retired. But he never felt like he had a choice, and he wanted his daughter to have choices. But I also knew getting married was something I wanted to do. I saw my mom, being the first one awake in the morning, getting everyone's lunches ready, getting us off to school, getting dinner in the crock pot. She was the last one to go to sleep at night. I knew I also wanted to be a wife, and I also wanted to be a mother. So if you would have asked me in high school, or if you would have asked me in college, are you a feminist? I would have said, hell yes. I mean, it would have been without hesitation, I would have gladly identified myself as a feminist because I knew what I wanted. I wanted to have this career. I wanted to be able to get married and have children, but I knew I wanted to have choices for my life. And I also knew that, my gender didn't make me inferior to the men in my class. I was better than the men in my class when it came to GPA. I was a valedictorian. I was always competing with them in the higher level math and science classes. I never felt less than. But today at 33, almost 34, I'm still in my Jesus year. That was a good way to think of it. Now it's just like all downhill. You can say that at Catholic school because you get it, but not everyone gets it. But 33, I'm pretty sure that I really don't think that the feminist movement wants me to have that title, feminist, or to self-identify as feminist, even though I believe my life is a pretty damn good testament to first wave and second wave feminists. I am the primary breadwinner in my home. My husband actually does not work anymore. He actually stays at home and homeschools our 4 children because of my career, because of the career choices that I have made. I was the first person in my dad's side, the entire side of the family, to go to college and get a higher level degree. I run a business, a small business. Now it's going to be a mid-sized business here in a couple months when we get our 50th employee. Most of my employees are women. The men in our office are a rarity. And I'm a mom. And I can do this while being a mom of 4 kids. I travel. Sometimes I bring my kids with me to events. A lot of times, if you're listening to my podcast or listening to a radio interview, you will hear the kids in the background because my office is not soundproof at the house. But I think my life is a pretty good testament to what first wave and second wave feminists envisioned and said that they envisioned for women in our country. But if you would ask today's mainstream feminist movement, many of the feminist leaders that I had the pleasure of speaking with yesterday on Capitol Hill, does Kristan Hawkins belong in the feminist movement? Can Kristan be a feminist? They would say, hell no. And in fact, I would argue that many of those first wave feminists, Susan B. Anthony, Frances Willard, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, even Alice Paul, the original author of the ERA, they wouldn't be welcome in today's feminist movement either. Why? Over one issue. Because I believe that this child, this is a fetal model of a fetus, of a preborn human being at 26 weeks. It's the exact weight and height of a child. Because I believe this child has rights. And I believe that conducting a heart attack abortion, this is a needle that's inserted inside the mother's stomach that pierces the heart of the child, and digoxin is inserted into the child's heart. This causes a heart attack. This is how late-term abortions are committed in our country. We induce heart attacks on children, and then 2 days later, we hope that the child has died, that the ultrasound-guided technician, the abortionist, made sure he actually inserted digoxin into the baby's heart, and the mother delivers a dead child. I'm not welcome in today's feminist movement because I believe this is a human rights violation. I believe this is a social injustice. It's wrong. This was demonstrated perfectly just 2 Januaries ago in Washington, D.C., right after President Trump was elected. There was the Great Women's March. Were any of you at the Women's March? I was at the Women's March. You probably saw me. Maybe not. It was these huge 20-foot, 20-foot banners. And we actually, when the Women's March was announced, I reached out to the organizers on Facebook and said, hey, we want to be a part of this because the majority of women actually are pro-life in our country. We should be represented. And we never got a response. Planned Parenthood was announced in the beginning of December as the platinum sponsor. A couple of my friends' organizations that have the word feminist in the title that don't say for life in them, they were actually admitted and put on the Women's March website as official co-sponsors because all you had to do was submit an application online. when an Atlantic article came out with myself and a couple other pro-life feminists being interviewed, the Women's March promptly took down their organization's names from the website, and a week before the Women's March in January released a statement of beliefs, saying they believe that feminism is about assuring equality for women and allowing access, taxpayer-funded access to abortion in all 9 months. We weren't welcome at the Women's March, but we went anyway. We actually led the Women's March for several blocks because it was so disorganized. One thing about pro-lifers is like we do the pro-life march every single year, so we're really good at demonstrations, mass demonstrations. And so we actually got to lead the Women's March. And then when our students, our high school age girls, were being assaulted by women my mom's age, we pulled back onto Constitution Avenue as the rest of the march went by with our abortion betrays women signs and banners. And we were there. We were there for the women who have been told that they have no other choice. There is no other choice than abortion. We were there for Tanya Reeves and the Cree Irwins who've died alone in the Planned Parenthood abortion facilities. We were there for the women who were holding their "fuck Trump" signs or whatever they were holding up, and then they would look up and see our "abortion betrays women" signs, and they would nod and put their head back down. We were there for them, and we wanted to be there. Men and women, I reject the lies of mainstream feminism that exclaim that abortion somehow sets me free, that abortion is needed for my freedom and for me to be an equal, that I have to pay somebody to commit an act of violence against someone else who's weaker than myself in order for me to be free. What's so interesting is we hear over and over again from the pro-abortion movement, from Planned Parenthood or whatever you want to call them, that we have to have this special surgery, that women have to have a special surgery and have to have a taxpayer-funded access to a special surgery in order to be free, in order to be equal to men. What does that say? It says that we are inferior. That message is that we are inferior, that unless we have a special surgery, we are somehow inferior to men. And that's damn wrong, because I know I'm not inferior to men. I am equal to men. In fact, I think we could plausibly argue that we are superior to men, because women, we menstruate, we gestate, and we can lactate. We have superpowers, as my friend from Guiding Star says it. We do. We have superpowers that half the population don't have. We can gestate whole human beings inside of us, and we can feed those human beings once we birth them. That doesn't make me inferior to men. It doesn't make me inferior. I believe the violence of abortion, what I showed you in this late-term abortion, which you can Google this violence of abortion has been and always will be the opposite of empowerment. And I believe it doesn't have a place. We don't have a place in our society for it. But what happened to feminism in America? When did the fight for women's equality become this extremist agenda advocating for abortion on demand for any reason in all 9 months of pregnancy and taxpayer funded? And when did it become like this? Throughout the different waves of feminism, there's always been core principles that have held constant. The discipline of nonviolence, the demand for equality, the understanding that one human being should never oppress another human being or treat another human being like property. Men and women, those tenets of feminism, nonviolence, demand for equality, believing that no human being should ever treat another human being like property, that describes the act of abortion. Well, some will try to muddy the conversation about abortion. They'll say, there's conflicting views about when life begins. It's not true. There's actually not conflicting views about when life begins. Science is 100% clear. The unique, whole, living human person comes into existence when egg and sperm unite. A whole new genetic code has been created that's never existed before and will never exist again. That is life. That is human life, because two humans can't make anything else besides a human. It's impossible. You can't make a dolphin or a koala bear, as much as I love them. By the way, there was a really cute video on Fox News about koala bears the other day. I saw it on my Facebook feed. I have it saved to watch later. I can't make a koala bear. I only make humans. That's just what happens. But regardless of whether you want to believe in science, and sometimes people will try to argue science, even though it is Googleable, abortion is violent. It's an intentional destruction of a living human being. That's exactly what abortion is. A successful abortion is when a human being exists no more. A successful abortion is when there's a dead human. That's a successful abortion. At its core, abortion should always be considered anti-feminist. And the feminist foremothers, the first wave feminists, those suffragettes, they understood that. Mary Wollstonecraft, the British feminist who kind of kicked off modern feminist thought, wrote openly against abortion. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who actually was involved in the slavery abolitionist movement, left the abolitionist movement because she was discouraged that there wasn't female leadership and the men were refusing to allow women to lead, who partnered with Susan B. Anthony to form the suffragist movement, wrote openly against abortion and infanticide. Sarah Norton, the first woman to win acceptance into an Ivy League school, Cornell, wrote openly against abortion. Victoria Woodhull, the first woman to run for president, the first female stockbroker, wrote openly against abortion. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, the first American female physician, wrote against abortion. Susan B. Anthony wrote against abortion. Actually, her magazine, The Revolution, that ran for about 3 years, had a very strict policy of not allowing any advertising in their magazine for at-home miscarriage management, which was the term they would use for induced abortions. Alice Paul, the original author of the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, which I'm going to talk about later. If you ever saw Iron Jawed Angels, Hilary Swank was in it. It's very good. You should watch it. It's a great historical movie. Alice Paul wrote that abortion is the ultimate exploitation of women. So the first wave feminists rejected abortion. They rejected infanticide. But 40 years after the 19th Amendment, when women were given our right to vote, the second wave of feminism kicked off with the Equal Pay Act of 1964. Then there was the Civil Rights Act Equal Pay Act was 1963. Civil Rights Act was 1964, which made it illegal to pay women and men different wages for the same work. Civil Rights Act included provisions prohibiting sex discrimination in hiring and promotion decisions. Contrary to popular belief, Betty Friedan's Feminist Mystique, first edition, did not talk about abortion as a fundamental right for women. It was not a rallying cry for abortion advocates across the country. It was two men, Larry Ladder, who was a biographer of Margaret Sanger, the eugenicist who was the founder of Planned Parenthood. Ladder, who was the ED of the Hugh Moore Fund, which actually believed in the impending population bomb. His organization believed in the 1970s, the United States of America was going to experience this huge population bomb. There was going to be mass starvation and no one was going to be able to eat. And he believed that abortion was the solution to this impending population bomb. Larry Ladder partnered with Bernard Nathanson, who was an abortionist in New York State committing abortions. They formed NARAL, National Association for Repeal Abortion Laws. Today it's called NARAL Pro-Choice America. It was Ladder and Nathanson who met with Friedan and convinced her that abortion had to be part of this new women's movement. This new feminist wave of feminism had to be intertwined with this new sexual revolution that was beginning to take place. Because up until that point, abortion was always like more of a white upper class men's thing. It was a eugenics thing. They had to have women talking about it. It was two men who hijacked the second wave of feminism. So tonight, my argument isn't that we go back to 1950s America and women are like stuck barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. although I love to be both. I'm a big baker. And I've been trying to convince my husband to let me have number 5, but since he's the one home all the time, I don't know if that's going to happen. Apparently my kids are very loud. But when I look at, where we're going in our society and where the feminist movement's going, I have a really hard time seeing where the future of the feminist movement goes in our country. Where are they going? Because today in America, women have full equality under the law. In 1970s, the Supreme Court found that the 14th Amendment did in fact mean both men and women. We have incredible freedoms in the United States. We can choose the career of our choice. We can choose the education we want. We can own property. We can vote. I can drive a car. And guess what? I can walk in front of my husband on the street. I don't have to walk behind him. There's a lot of things that I can do here in America that women across the world can't do. We have incredible rights. Are there more things that we have to work on? Absolutely. In enforcement we have to work on? Absolutely. Yet the abortion industry and those who lead today's feminist movement, what you hear over and over again will claim what we have is not enough, that women, we need more. That abortion is needed for our equality. We saw this perfectly in the amicus brief filed before the Supreme Court just a couple years ago in the Hellerstedt and Whole Women's Health decision, where 113 female lawyers wrote to the Supreme Court saying that they wouldn't be lawyers if it hadn't been for their abortion. The abortion allowed them the ability to have an integrated life, a successful life. There was an article in Salon not long ago. A woman wrote, "I'm pro-abortion because being able to delay and limit childbearing is fundamental to female empowerment and equality. A woman who lacks the means to manage her fertility lacks the means to manage her life. Any plans, dreams, aspirations, responsibilities, or commitments, no matter how important, how great, big contingency clause, until or unless I get pregnant, in which case all bets are off. Think of any professional woman you know. She wouldn't be in that role if she had been able to limit her time, been able to time and limit her childbearing. Think of any girl you know who imagines becoming a professional woman. She won't get there unless she has effective, reliable means to manage her fertility." That's crazy. That's crazy. The fact that I can menstruate, gestate, and lactate, that I can grow human beings inside of me, I can feed those human beings, and that I can be a mother, but I can't have the career I want. What are we telling women? What are we telling women? I'm not inferior because I can have children. My fertility doesn't make me less than. But that's exactly what we hear over and over and over again. And the feminist movement has institutionalized this radical belief everywhere. We hear it. One of our friends, Allie, who went to the Planned Parenthood, was raised in a Christian home, said she knew abortion was wrong when she went in, but was in crisis. And the reassuring words she heard from Planned Parenthood was, "It'll be all over in 10 minutes and you'll never have to think about it again." She still thinks about it every day and is still in counseling because of that abortion decision. It's in the words of the administrator at Fordham University, a Fordham Catholic college, who told Eleanor, "Well, if you decide to keep your baby, you can't live in the dorms anymore because we don't allow children in the dorms. Or you could just have an abortion." When Eleanor decided to move off campus so she could keep her baby and stay in school, that's what feminism should be about, she was told by Fordham, "Well, you've chosen to move off campus, therefore you're losing your $10,000 a year housing scholarship." That is radical pro-abortion feminism institutionalized. Because instead of trying to help her, instead of trying to say there's another way, that you don't have to choose between the life of your child and your education, between the life of your child and your career, we tell her it's just easy to get taken care of. That you can't do it. That you're not strong enough. We've been sold this bag of lies from mainstream feminism. I'm going to go over 5 lies tonight. The first lie I want to go over is the myth that sex is without consequence. I mean, I don't think this should be a shocking one. Everyone here should be adults and they understand that sex has some interesting consequences to it. Sometimes the consequences are inconvenience, they're a rash, something you have to go to a clinic and get treatment for, an antibiotic. Sometimes they're a little embarrassing. Sometimes they're lifelong, like herpes, and you can never get rid of them. Ooh, don't ever Google that, by the way. Just don't do it. Still weird. I can't believe people put pictures of themselves online. But then there's other consequences of sex. And one very natural consequence of heterosexual sex is the creation of a unique, whole human being. That's a natural consequence of sex. But see, when sex was changed, and the nature of sex was changed, and it was taken out of a committed relationship between two people who've pledged to spend their lives together, it was made into something casual, and was made into something possibly cheap. We had to change. We had to do things differently. That is why you saw the introduction of contraception, and why you ultimately will see the introduction of abortion in American society. Because if you're not going to spend your life with that other person, if you haven't committed to spending your life with that other person, you certainly aren't going to want to procreate with that other person. Once sex was trivialized, taken out of that lifelong commitment, we had to be sold that second set of lies from the mainstream feminist movement, which is that contraception is necessary for the advancement of women. That, once again, that my fertility is not a gift, but it's something that I should suppress. It's something that I should ingest artificial hormones that we know are bad for our bodies in order to live our lives as we see fit, in order to be equal. This actually used to be one of the most controversial parts when I would speak on campuses. Now it's actually not so much, because all of us are trying to do as much as good of a job as we can at taking care of our bodies, right? I don't drink milk or let my children drink milk from non-organic cows. Cows are treated with artificial hormones. I only buy organic meat. This makes sense to people. Why are we putting these dangerous chemicals into our bodies? Why are we told for years and years and years that this is good for us, that this is freedom, this is cool to be on the birth control pill, to take these hormones, when we know these are damaging to our bodies? We know, biology shows us that men and women are different. We are different. I know, controversial. We are different. Our bodies are different. Chemistry shows us this. Biology shows us this. Social science shows us this. You don't have to look much different, much further than like our brains. When you're looking at antidepressants, and when doctors are prescribing antidepressants, they have to know the gender of their patient, because certain antidepressants will affect men one way and they'll affect women in another way, because our brains are different. Once again, going back to the argument that we could argue that women are a superior sex. Why? Because women, our neurons are more connected to our left and right hemispheres. That's why we can multitask. That's why it doesn't stress me out to like be on a conference call, making dinner, answering emails, and making sure no one's killing themselves at the house. But like when I leave the house, so when I left, so Sunday night, I had to make 3 dinners for my husband. And like before, I used to just like make the hamburger patties and I'd put them in the refrigerator, and all I had to do was make them, and then I'd come home and they'd still be in the refrigerator. And I was like, what is going on? Why haven't you eaten the hamburger patties? And you're texting me saying you're hungry at midnight when I'm trying to sleep. and this is a true story. And he said, well, I don't have time. I'm trying to watch your kids. I can't make the hamburgers. I'm like, really? You couldn't just put them on the grill? But he can't do it. And I've watched him. He just can't do it. He's an amazing human being, but he can't do it. And it's not his fault. It's just the way his brain's made. We're different, but that's okay. I know, I'm kind of wishing my husband doesn't watch the live stream, right? Stephen Rhodes, from a UVA professor, has written openly, about, the dangers of becoming a gender-aligned society. And I really like this quote from one of his articles. He talked about how ignoring the differences between male and female is actually very dangerous, and who it's most dangerous for is for women. Because he said the goal of a gender-aligned society tends to transform itself into making women more like men. As a result, male interests, values, priorities set the agenda for women aspiring to break into the ranks of the powerful. Yep. As someone who worked in Washington, D.C. for 10 years, who worked within the political realm, I can attest to this. It is a male-dominated town in Washington, D.C. And you, as a woman, have to conform. You have to conform, or you can leave. That's a problem. That's a problem. We know from the first wave of feminists, they actually, not only did they speak openly against, abortion and infanticide, many of them actually spoke out openly against the use of contraceptives within a marriage. And there wasn't really a thing to use contraceptives outside of marriage in the 1800s. They actually spoke openly against contraceptive use. And the reason they spoke so boldly against it, because they believed that contraceptive use within couples would allow men to stray, would give men an ability to do what they want, to use our bodies for pleasure, and then demand later on that we just get it taken care of. I know a lot of women who've had that abortion because their boyfriend told them just to get it taken care of and handed her $350. We know, artificial hormones, artificial contraception can be an abortifacient in some degrees. Not all contraceptives can be abortifacient, but some. We can see that on the back of the box, the Plan B box, when it says, will not harm an existing pregnancy, and 2 lines down says, may prohibit the implantation of a fertilized egg. A fertilized egg is a human person because you didn't come from a fertilized egg, you once were a fertilized egg. Fertilized egg, if you Google it, is the word zygote. Our stages in life are zygote, embryo, fetus, infant, toddler, adolescent. But we also know that hormonal birth control it doesn't really prevent unplanned pregnancies, and we see that. Today, contraceptives are everywhere. Any college campus, you're handed a bag of condoms in your freshman orientation. Condoms and contraceptives are widely available. Not obviously, hopefully at BC, I don't know, who knows. But it doesn't, we know from studies like Guttmacher, Planned Parenthood's own research arm, that proves this. There was a study that came out just a year and a half ago from BPAS, the British Pregnancy Advisory Service. They are the Planned Parenthood of the UK, they're like the leading abortion vendor in the UK. Their own study that they publicized found that 51% of women who procured abortions at their centers did so because of the failure of their contraceptive method. Those stats are right on with what we see with the Guttmacher Institute, who measures abortions and why women have abortions here in the United States. 51%. In response to the study in the Huffington Post, the BPAS chief executive said, our data shows women cannot control their fertility through contraception alone, even when they're using some of the most effective methods. Family planning is contraception and abortion. Abortion is birth control that women need when their regular method lets them down. That's right there. We know contraceptive isn't foolproof. There's a 9% failure rate with the birth control pill. I read a statistic today, one of actually a feminist magazine. It was 1 out of 11 women who are using birth control pills will get pregnant in a year. 1 out of, actually it's 1 out of 9, and then it's 1 out of 11 who are using condoms. So condoms actually have, obviously have a higher failure rate. I definitely wouldn't get into a plane that had an 18% failure rate a year. So I don't know. I'm on the planes a lot. I wouldn't do that, but some people like to do that. We've seen the scientific articles about how hormonal contraception is bad for our bodies. The Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Institute based in Seattle has published articles about hormonal contraceptives, about IUDs, also about Depo-Provera, the shot, and the risk of breast cancer. In one study, they actually talked about all the most commonly prescribed birth control pills in the United States, and then their rate for potentially causing a type of breast cancer. A Danish study came out last year in American Journal of Psychiatry that was the largest of its kind. It tracked 500,000 women for a period of 8 years, found that the risk of attempting suicide was nearly twice as high for women who are taking a hormonal contraceptive. These aren't pro-life sources that I'm citing by any means, by the way. The World Health Organization has labeled some hormonal contraceptives as a type 1 carcinogen, the same as cigarettes and asbestos. There's a great resource you can go to on Facebook. It's called Sweetening the Pill. It's a documentary that Ricki Lake, I don't know if any of you know who Ricki Lake was. She was like a talk show host in the 90s. She's been making this documentary. They're not pro-life at all. They're pro-abortion, but they're actually making a documentary based off of a book called Sweetening the Pill by a pro-abortion feminist, Holly Grigswell, that actually talks about these are all of the potential problems that we see in women across the United States and across the world because of birth control. And these aren't pro-life sources. These are women saying, wait, why am I having to suppress my fertility? Why is that bad? And what's the damage being done to my body in this process and seeking equality? But we can't talk about this. I've been at Christian schools where people threw their birth control pills at me. People get mad, file a civil rights complaint against me simply for speaking about this, because it's a touchy subject. Because many of us have been on birth control at some point in our lives. That all of us know someone who's on birth control. If I went on TV one time on MSNBC and made the mistake of talking about this, and I had to turn off my social media for an entire weekend because this is the argument that I got. You're so fat, ugly. Why would anyone want to have sex with you? Of course, you're anti-contraception. That's literally the level of dialogue. And I just edited out the words that were being used. Lots of C words. But that's the level of dialogue we have in our country. We can't even have an honest discussion with ourselves because we bought into these lies. We can't have an honest discussion. We've been duped into believing whatever we're being told is gospel truth. We don't even question it for ourselves. I reject that fact that I have to take carcinogenic drugs for decades to prohibit a natural function of my body in order to be equal to my husband or to be equal to men. That's crazy. So when contraception fails, whether you're using a barrier method type of contraceptives or you're using a hormonal type of contraceptives, which we know will happen and can happen, the stats are very clear about the 18% failure rate a year for condoms, about the 9% failure rate for the birth control pill. We have to be sold the third and fourth lies of mainstream feminism, which that abortion is needed. They will argue, they will maintain that abortion is needed for women to achieve our goals. In fact, I read you some of the quotes earlier. Abortion is somehow needed to make me free. The other one is that abortion is safe and that's harmless. That's too commonplace. Of course it's okay. We can start with the fact that today, the abortion debate really isn't about whether or not abortion kills. In 1995, third-wave feminist Naomi Wolf, lover or hater, came out and in New Republic and said, the statement, abortion stops at being heart, is incontrovertibly true. Pro-abortion feminist Camille Paglia has written Salon. I've always frankly admitted that abortion is murder. In Conscious, a Catholic magazine, former Catholics for Choice president Francis Kiesling said, yes, the fetus does have value. It's not over whether or not abortion kills. That's really what it should be about. But what we hear from mainstream feminism is it's about women's freedom. That my right to do what I want supersedes the right of my little girl inside of me. Her rights are less than my rights. Sounds like oppression to me. Definitely sounds like oppression. Rather than seeking to truly serve pregnant women and parenting women, rather seeking to truly serve her in her moment of confusion, her moment of crisis, we tell her to simply Google abortion, which we know is going to conveniently be located very close to campus. 79% of Planned Parenthoods are 5 miles from a college campus. As she seeks advice from her boyfriend, from her friends, even like people who go to church with her, her family, she's going to hear that feminist mantra repeated over and over again: your body, your choice. Whatever you choose, whatever you decide to do. The subtext for her when she hears that, as someone who's counseled women in crisis, when she hears that word, your body, your choice, what does she hear? Have the abortion. That's what she hears. I can't tell you how many women I've talked to who didn't want to have the abortion. Their partner didn't want them to have an abortion, but he bought into the lies his mom told him that he didn't have a say. So he just told her, it's whatever you want to do, I'll be there to support you. But he didn't want her to have the abortion, but he wouldn't say it. All she wanted him to say was, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. But neither one of them communicated that. And then they both lived to regret their abortion decision. That's what we hear. Because of the legalization of abortion through all 9 months, and by the way, Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton gave us legal abortion in all 9 months for whatever reason. Some states have regulated abortion, so abortion isn't legal in all 9 months. But states like New York, we're seeing it in Rhode Island, Vermont, they're preparing themselves for the overturn of Roe versus Wade. So they're passing laws now that are going to allow abortion all 9 months and make it so physicians won't be criminally punishable if they don't treat a child born alive during an abortion. It's called infanticide. But because we've had legal abortion, we've been lazy. Our nation hasn't had to have these difficult conversations with women. How we can help her, how we can provide what she needs. We haven't had to do it. I know, I've seen it. No woman ever feels enthusiasm for her abortion. No woman's like proudly declaring to everybody on campus, oh, I'm just having an abortion this weekend. I'll be back in commission next week. No one does that. If you ever go out and stand in front of an abortion facility, whether you're praying or whether you're just standing there silently, you'll see women walking in for their abortion, get there early on Saturday morning. She's looking down. She's crying. When she leaves, it's the same way. She's not, cheerily talking to her friends on her phone. She's not smiling when she goes in to have that abortion. She's not there because she feels like she's exercising some great choice. She doesn't choose abortion because she feels like she has this great empowering right to do so. She chooses to have that abortion, to pay somebody to dismember her child. Why? Because she feels like she has no other choices, that she's run out of choices. Because we as a society have failed her. Our schools have failed her. Our church has failed her. Because we don't talk about it. What are the resources here at BC for pregnant and parenting women? Are they talked about? Are they advertised? Because most women, when you ask them on a college campus, and we've gone on to college campuses interviewing women, hey, what's available on campus if you become pregnant? I don't know, go to Planned Parenthood. Hey, is there daycare? Can you participate in the faculty daycare? Is there family housing? Because those are the two biggest needs she has, is housing and daycare. Is there a scholarship? I don't know. We have failed her. We don't want to talk about it. It's a little uncomfortable. As Christians, and I can say this because I'm at a Catholic school, as Christians, it's kind of like a weird subject because we don't want to look like we're condoning the actions that led to the unplanned pregnancy. So, for example, a year and a half ago, a student approached us, Maddie, who went to a Christian high school, was 4.0, senior class president, became pregnant. What did her Christian school do upon finding out? Expel her. Her parents fought back and they said, fine, 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 you can come back, but you have to go in front of the whole school and tell them you sinned. And you can't go to the class trip, and you can't walk in graduation, you can't do any more extracurriculars. Maddie did it. She went in front of the whole school and said, yes, I sinned and I had sex. But then she contacted us and said, it's kind of not right that, I did all this stuff. I took my 2-day suspension just like other kids who've gotten suspended for drinking or whatever, but they're still not letting me walk. We launched a public relations nightmare for that school. Like, there is a guy who probably has a little voodoo doll with pins, and every time my back hurts, it's probably this man, because the principal had to leave the school. We launched a public relations nightmare for that school. And we told them, I was on the phone with the principal, and I said, sir, you have to change this policy. Sir, this is not how Christians behave. And usually, this is when the conversation is going to be bad. Look here, Missy. So usually, when the conversation's really bad. So we went to the New York Times, because of course I knew the New York Times would take this article, because it's about Christians being hypocrites, and they love that. And so we went to the New York Times. And we said, here's Maddie. She was a whole cover story. Maddie Runkles. There's a whole page. We did NBC Today show. We did Fox. We did CNN. We did all the shows. And we told people across the country, call the school, demand that Maddie get to walk in graduation. The school never relented. They actually never let her walk. We actually had to hold an alternative graduation ceremony for her. We raised $16,000 in scholarship funds for her from our own donors, paid for her graduation party. Her baby's so cute. I'm Aunt Kristan. But I took a lot of heat from that. I had pro-lifers. I lost supporters at Students for Life. People calling me to say, how dare you? You're making a hero out of this girl, and she sinned. We as Christians can't even have a real conversation about this. Like, I know she sinned. Hello, I sinned like 50 times today, but it doesn't mean we don't support her. Like, this is what we're about as Christians. This is what we are about as pro-lifers. But we've failed her because our church can't even have that discussion about how to help her and what we need to do. We know no woman ever chooses to have that abortion. It's not there because it's awesome. It's there because she's run out of choices. First wave feminist Maddie Brinkerhoff wrote, when a man steals to satisfy hunger, we may safely conclude that there is something wrong with society. So when a woman destroys the life of her unborn child, it is evidence that either by education or circumstances, she has been greatly wrong. I would maintain, men and women, that we've failed her through our own laziness. If you go to that fourth lie of mainstream feminism, that abortion is safe and easy for women, we know that's not the case. Now, by the way, getting really good statistical research about abortion in the United States is very difficult to do because abortion is polarized. You actually have to look to countries where abortion is not controversial to get data. Researchers in Finland have identified a strong statistical association between abortion and suicide in their records-based study. They found a mean annual suicide rate for all women was 11.3 per 100,000, but the rate for women following abortion was 34.7, 3 times higher. The suicide rate associated with birth was half the rate of all women and less than 1/6 the rate of suicide among women who had had abortions. There's numerous studies that have linked. This one source I was looking at the other day, it was over 20 studies that were linking women who are post-abortive to higher uses of drug and alcohol abuse. PTSD. One study, the lowest rate of PTSD reported following abortion was 1.5%, which would be about 600,000 cases. Another study found that up to 14% of American women have all the symptoms of PTSD and attribute them to their abortions. The British Journal of Psychiatry, not a pro-life source, found that women who had undergone an abortion experienced an 81% increased risk of mental health problems. 81%. I found that on Guttmacher's website, Planned Parenthood's research arm. A 2003 landmark article, an obstetrical and gynecological survey, compiled the results of several studies on abortion. They show that induced abortion increases the risk of placenta previa and later pregnancy by 50%. Placenta previa is basically when the placenta covers the cervix, and if it's not treated carefully, when she goes into labor, she'll bleed out. My sister and my nephew actually almost died of this. It's very dangerous. They also found that abortion doubled the risk of preterm birth. These are things the medical community already knows, because when you go into the doctor and you go in to have a pregnancy test at OBGYN, one of the first questions you get after how are you going to pay for it is, how many abortions have you had? How many miscarriages have you had? How many live births have you had? They're asking for a reason because they know these things. They know these things. Cancer Causes Control, a prestigious medical journal in 2014, published one study concluding that one abortion increased the risk of breast cancer by 44%. For women who had 2 abortions, the risk rose to 76% and then almost doubled after 3 or more abortions. This was a Chinese study. It was a meta-analysis of 36 studies from 14 Chinese provinces. The same summer, there was actually a Bangladesh study showing about the same thing. Their rate was 20%. And let me be clear. We don't need vendors like Planned Parenthood preying off of our generation, doubling down on these lies, proliferating these lies. We have enough resources. We actually do have resources in our nation to help support her. There are more than 8,000 FQHCs in our country. FQHC stands for a Federally Qualified Health Center. I work in the government for a little bit, and you'll learn all the acronyms. You can go to findahealthcenter.hrsa.gov. What's really awesome about federally qualified health centers is they provide all the services that Planned Parenthood provides, minus abortion, plus way more. Plus way more. And if you go to them and you need a service that they don't provide, they're actually obligated to help you find a provider who can serve you. And if you don't have a ride there, they're obligated to help you get a ride. These federally qualified health centers are more than 8,000. They serve more than 21 million men, women, and children every year. They're true nonprofits. They actually serve women and men and children for a lower cost than Planned Parenthood. Their average cost per patient for treatment is $146. Planned Parenthood is $186. If tomorrow, for some glorious reason, every single Planned Parenthood in America would shut down, every federally qualified health center would only have to see 2 more patients per week to absorb the 2 million patients Planned Parenthood brags about seeing. We have resources out there. The challenge is a lot of people don't know about them. I haven't even touched upon the 3,000 pregnancy resource centers that are out there. And let me be very clear. Planned Parenthood is not just like a health center that does abortions on the side. They are an abortion vendor. They're very clear that abortion is their mission. You can look at Leanna Wynn's personal tweets, the new president of Planned Parenthood. You can research Cecile Richards, the former president of Planned Parenthood. She actually tweeted, the Trump administration approached Planned Parenthood early on in their presidency because, not all the Trump family is on the pro-life bandwagon. And Ivanka actually met with Planned Parenthood. And their idea was they wanted to kind of appease people like me and defund Planned Parenthood, but then still be able to give money to Planned Parenthood. And so they being the naive people, they hadn't experienced Planned Parenthood like we have, went and met with Planned Parenthood. So we have a really great idea. Why don't you separate all of your non-abortion services into Planned Parenthood? We can continue giving you $500 million in grant funding, and you just incorporate your abortion services into another entity. That way, we can tell pro-lifers that we've defunded the abortion industry, and there's no way there's any fungibility going on with funds. Planned Parenthood actually leaked out the details of this meeting. Cecile Richards then tweeted, PP is proud to provide abortion, a necessary service that's as vital to our mission as birth control and cancer screenings. This is from their own president's mouth. This is crazy. Planned Parenthood has abortion quotas. We know from former Planned Parenthood workers. We actually have seen the pictures of the Planned Parenthoods getting awards for selling so many abortions. Salesmen have quotas. You have to sell so many cars, to sell so many life insurance policies. If Planned Parenthood is just simply doing abortions to help out women, why the hell do they have a quota? They're selling something. And it's destruction and suppression. We also know as Planned Parenthood's federal money, as their federal funds that they continue to receive from us has gone up and up and up to now it's over $500 million, their services are going down. In the past 10 years, their total services have declined by 11%. Their contraceptive services have declined by 22%. Their breast exams have declined by 65%. Their pap smears have declined by 72%. Their adoption referrals have declined by 42%. But guess what? One thing is up: abortion. it's up 9%. Despite the fact that abortion numbers are lowering every single year, that there's fewer abortions, Planned Parenthood is actually increasing their share of the abortion industry, is actually committing more and more abortions. The more federal funding they get, the more abortions they commit. There was some undercover tapes of the National Abortion Federation, NAF. That's where all the abortionists get together and like talk and like sing Kumbaya and get to be friends. And it was interesting because the one panel that they had a local abortionist in Florida there complaining about the fact that she was on the board of the Planned Parenthood in Florida and she loved Planned Parenthood, but she was providing great health care. But all of a sudden, Planned Parenthood moved into her community and set up a mega center. And she thought they were all friends, but they just located down the street from her. She was shocked to find that Planned Parenthood is like the Walmart of the abortion industry. And that's a direct quote from an abortionist in the Wall Street Journal. They're an abortion vendor. That's what they're about. The fifth lie we hear over and over again, and this is one that's new, something you may not even heard about yet, but you're going to hear about very soon. The congressman, the Democratic pro-abortion congressman, the State of the Union to all the women in white, which, by the way, that took a lot of courage to wear white. I would never wear all that white. I only wear black, by the way. They had all the white on, but then they had these little blue pins on, ERA. Have any of you heard of the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment? Yeah. Today I got a fundraising email, actually, from NARAL about the ERA. So the ERA failed to be ratified 3 states short in 1982. If you've learned anything, watch Iron Jawed Angels and you'll learn about the constitutional amendment process. It failed. In the meantime, Americans have passed laws. The Equal Pay Act, the Civil Rights Act, the Federal Minimum Wage Act, the Equal Employment Act, the Pregnancy Non-Discrimination Act, that made sure that women were treated fairly in the workplace, or made sure women were treated fairly in education. So we don't really need an equal rights amendment anymore because this is all taken care of. And actually, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the feminist icon, in her book, Sex, Bias in the U.S. Code, actually argued that the ERA would actually invalidate 800 laws that have been passed to protect women. Because if you pass the ERA, essentially any law that's been written to protect women would become invalidated because it would say it's illegal to protect any one gender over the other. So it actually could very much hurt women. So the ERA is coming back, and people are saying we need to pass the ERA. Why? Because the abortion industry, the abortion movement is very scared that Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned very soon. And it will be. If I have anything to do with it, Roe versus Wade is history. And the decision of abortion will come back to the states, which, by the way, the majority of millennials want the decision of abortion to come back to the state. They want the right to be able to vote on their officials for how they want abortion policy in their state. Because they don't want 7 men in Washington, D.C. making up the rules for them anymore. So abortion is going to come back to the states. So the abortion movement's afraid. They want to make sure abortion's cemented in the Constitution. So over and over again, I've heard the ERA is nothing about abortion. It doesn't mention abortion. There's nothing in it about abortion. Now, in the 70s and 80s, the pro-life movement came out and said, great, fine. If the Equal Rights Amendment's just like this feel-good thing, then let's just put abortion neutralizing language in it. And let's just say this doesn't talk about abortion. Every single time that compromise was proposed, guess what? Shock, it was shut down. Betty Friedan spoke openly, saying further, I am convinced if we lose this struggle for the ERA, we will have little hope in our own lifetime of saving our right to abortion. The ERA is actually the Everything Related to Abortion Act. Today, NARAL, Pro-Choice America, sent out a nice little fundraising email advocating for the ERA. The ERA would reinforce the constitutional right to abortion by clarifying that the sexes have equal rights, which require judges to strike down anti-abortion laws because they violate both the constitutional right to privacy and sexual equality. Jennifer Weiss-Wolf, she's an NYU, I think it's Legal and Democracy Fellow, has written openly in Daily Beast, it was a great interview this summer, about why we need the ERA. Because she said, look, technology has moved past the point where the trimester framework, which Roe created, isn't going to work. Because, we can see the baby in the womb. That's why. So she said, if the right to abortion was grounded in the equality movement, it would change everything. And that's exactly what we saw today in NARAL Pro-Choice America's fundraising. It's exactly what we saw yesterday on Capitol Hill at the briefing that I spoke at. The ERA and the ballot's coming back. It's like I said, it failed to pass. They went 2 years ago to get Nevada to pass it. They had Illinois pass it this year. We stopped it from passing in Virginia. They're going to try to get one more state to say they have 38 states, and then they're going to try to get Congress to retroactively change their time limit. It'll be a huge constitutional fight. I'm pretty confident we'll win, but it shows you just how desperate they are. We know the ERA, once again, is all about abortion because in states that have passed state ERAs, New Mexico and Connecticut, their Supreme Court, their state Supreme Court, found that taxpayers have to fund abortion because of the ERA. Because once again, the ERA says that women, we need special surgeries. We need special surgeries in order to be equal. That our bodies are inferior to men because of who we are and how we are made. So, you can say I'm a little angry about the lies feminists tell. The mainstream feminist movement has peddled in our country for the past several decades. That the lies that they keep repeating, that sex is without consequence, that hormonal birth control is great, is needed for our body, and it's okay to use, that abortion is needed, is a solution to guarantee our equality, that abortion is safe, that now that the Equal Rights Amendment somehow is going to change my whole life and make me equal to men. Those of us who reject the violence of abortion, of the tearing apart of a unique, whole, living human being, I would maintain that we're the ones fighting for real choice, for nonviolent choices, for nonviolent health care in our society. We know that we don't need to control our bodies, our fertility with medication, with special surgeries that inflict great pain and torture and oppression on another human person. We also understand that sending her off alone and scared to the abortionist, saying it's your body, it's your choice, that there's no justice in it for her, that the reasons that led her to the abortion facility to begin with are still going to be there when she wakes up from the procedure. They'll be there when she goes home. It's the pro-life movement. It's actually the pro-life generation that's advocating for support for pregnant and parenting women and families in need. Because we can't just ship her off to an abortion facility. We can't just ship her off to a Planned Parenthood. We actually have to do more, and that's what we're doing. So do I call myself a feminist anymore? Not really. Sometimes I feel like it, and sometimes I don't. I think my life and the way I live my life and the success I've been able to have in my life is a testament to the first wave and what second wave feminists advocated for women. But honestly, like most of the time, I don't want my story, my struggle, to be co-opted by the feminist movement. I know certainly they don't want me to call myself a feminist. There's a snap for that. There you go. I want the lies that the feminist movement sells brought to light. I want women to know that the choice isn't either or. That this false choice doesn't have to be made between her and her child. I want women in our generation to know that those fundamental tenets of feminism, of equality, of nonviolence, refusing to treat other human beings like property, they're found in the pro-life movement and the anti-abortion movement.
Thank you, Kristan. So now we're going to have about 30 minutes for questions and comments. If you have a question, if you could please come forward to your right side of the auditorium and please sit on the steps as you wait. The front of the line will be after the first handrail, and if you're unable to come forward, please raise your hand and we will bring the microphone to you. And you'll have about 30 seconds maximum to civilly voice your questions. That way we can get as many questions as possible, and we will hold the microphone for you. And thank you for your participation in this dialogue.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to drink as much water as I possibly can. Hey.
Hello?
Yeah, it's on. You're just soft-spoken.
I was wondering about, you frequently use the language pro-abortion to describe the side of this debate that you disagree with. And I know most people who consider themselves on the not pro-life side who describe themselves as pro-choice, indicating the belief that the woman whose body is in question here has the ability to decide whether they want to have the child or have an abortion or not. So I was wondering why your decision was to use the phrase pro-abortion when that would not necessarily be how the people you're discussing would identify themselves.
Sure. Well, I believe Americans are either anti-abortion or they're pro-abortion. Either you're anti-legal abortion or you're pro-legal abortion. Now, the article I actually quoted from Salon was, I really, really appreciated the intellectual honesty here, because she said, recently Daily Kos published an article titled, "I am pro-choice, not pro-abortion. Has anyone ever been truly pro-abortion?" Yes, me. That would be me. I'm pro-abortion like I'm pro-knee replacement and pro-chemotherapy and pro-cataract surgery. I think you need to own it. I think this is what has been so effective in the abortion industry today, is the semantics of saying pro-choice, of giving people a cop-out. Abortion isn't a preference claim. It's not, chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla ice cream or whatever. It's a moral claim. I'm making a moral claim to you tonight that abortion is innately a violation of human rights, is a moral wrong, because it's a taking of an innocent human life that is unique, whole, and a separate human being. So own it. I'm anti-abortion, and I'm proud to say that I'm anti-abortion. I actually use that often in interviews and things that I do. But then, because I'm anti-legal abortion. If you're for abortion, then say you're for abortion. The fact that people won't say that they're for abortion, why do people get mad when I say, no, you're pro-abortion? They go, no, I'm pro-choice. Why do you get mad? Why? Because if abortion's so good, then own the damn word. But the challenge is no one wants to own the word, because we hear the word abortion, and Top of the Mind polling shows us this. When the majority of people hear the word abortion, we think of death, killing, sadness. Those are the three top of the mind words that people hear in their minds when they hear the word abortion. If abortion is good, own it. Use the term. Yeah. We got that on film, right? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Leslie Hamilton. I am one of the heads of the Women's March Disability Caucus, one of the heads of Third Wave Feminism, the organization. I am a drug, disability, and healthcare policy expert for 2 Senate campaigns, 3 congressional campaigns, multiple local campaigns. My strong point. You talked about disability and how you're a disability activist or advocate or whatever. I know 2 of your children have cystic fibrosis. You talk about that being one of your what is it called, inspirations for being pro-life. But cystic fibrosis is not diagnosed in utero.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's called a CVS test, chronic virus samplus test, and 90% of children who are diagnosed in utero CF are actually aborted.
It's percentages. There are other disabilities that are completely diagnosed in utero, which are stronger arguments. Also, you talked about the pill, which, yes, I was always on the pill, and it worsened my depression and my suicidal ideation. But every medication has negative side effects. You talk about lithium. It has negative side effects. No matter what you put in your body, there's going to be negative side effects. Best way to do it is talk to people about it. And then there's Paragard that isn't hormonal. That is still a form of contraception. And these kind of contraceptions, the NuvaRing, implants, all those.
The IUD, you're talking about the IUD?
Yes.
That's actually, that can be abortifacient, because if the embryo implants into the uterine wall.
You're talking about right before Paragard can be used as a emergency contraceptive. I'm very well aware of that. It is part of my drug policy.
What is your question? I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time.
I'm getting to it. I'm getting to it.
So cystic fibrosis.
I'd let you speak. I really would prefer if you let me speak right now.
I know, but it's hard when there's so many wrong things going on at some time.
We let you speak the whole time.
So go ahead, ask me your question.
I think this is kind of ridiculous. I should be allowed to speak right now.
Go ahead, ask me your question.
I'm getting to it. Now let me talk. My turn.
Isn't there like a 3-second rule? Yeah. Ask your question.
Are you supposed to speak for 40 minutes and let us ask questions for 50?
Because I'm the guest speaker.
And I'm a student here, and I have the right to speak.
Everyone, we have a whole line, so please ask your question. Ask your question.
Okay, well, we'll talk about this. You talk about having abortions and you're like pro-life, but you work for an administration, Trump's administration, that's actively taking away the rights to health care. He's trying to cut Medicare. His administration, his head of Medicare and Medicaid administrator is working to try to get block grants into Medicaid, which will kick thousands of people off Medicaid across the country and lead to deaths. But apparently you're so pro-life, but you can support someone like that who's working to make sure, like, oh, we care about you in the womb, but the second that you're born, you're on your own, and that's talking about disability.
Okay, so that's the end of her question. Okay, so first, I never worked for the Trump administration. I served on his advisory board. I will be at the White House on Thursday. Well, I'm just correcting inaccuracies as I hear them as fast as possible. I will be at the White House on Thursday for an executive order on campus free speech, which is really cool because this is what this is. When we're talking about healthcare policy, I speak a lot about healthcare policy. In fact, I actually organized a group of moms of disabled children and genetic disabled children during the Obamacare debacle of 2009, 2010. And we actually had several press conferences, media appearances, lobby days with our moms group on Capitol Hill arguing against Obamacare and socialized medicine. Why? Because here, let me give you one great example. In the UK, my son and daughter take a pill that's $35,000 a month. It's $35,000 a month. The pharmaceutical company, Vertex, which is actually based here, they have a commitment to the CF community that whatever insurances are covered, they'll cover the drug. I don't pay more than $15 a month for the drug, no matter what my insurance covers. That drug has been approved. Gunnar has actually been on the drug. It's the first drug in the history of the world that corrects a genetic defect. It's pretty freaking awesome. And then he's in the study trial for the 3rd generation right now, which is going to be 10% more effective. It's pretty awesome. That drug still can't get approved in the UK. National Health Group in the UK will not approve that drug. Why? Because it's just too costly. There's too few CF patients, and the drug costs too much. That's the risk, and that is actually why I advocate so fiercely against the socialized Medicaid for all healthcare program. Because when the collective decides who gets treatment and who gets value, you know, President Obama's appointment to the Center for Medicaid and Medicaid Services, the CMS, Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, Donald Bierwick, wrote openly in the medical journal, The Lancet, that when we decide who gets what care, everything has to be rationed, and we have to decide who's actually going to produce the most for society. So people between 15 and 40, they would get the prime care. They would get the most expensive care because society has already invested in 15-year-olds through all of our educational systems and all the public support systems. And so we can't lose that investment. This is what's literally being argued in our medical field. So I think as pro-lifers, we can disagree about healthcare policy with the goal that we all share and the goal that we all agree on, that we believe all human beings should have a right to healthcare and should have access to healthcare. But we may have different solutions, policy solutions for how we get there. It doesn't mean you're a bad person or I'm a bad person because we may disagree on healthcare policy, but that's not what the left does in America today. Today in the left, if you're not for Medicare for all or socialized healthcare, you're an evil bastard. And that's how you're depicted. Next question.
First of all, I think this is great that we can all be in the same room and have a conversation, whatever side you're on.
Yep.
So my question is about contraception.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about the fact that it changes women's superpowers, such as menstruating.
Mm-hmm. I love that you use superpowers, by the way.
But you have a daughter yourself. If you found out that she was using the pill, would you think of her less than a woman?
No, absolutely not.
Then why would you say that it changes our superpowers or the things that make us more superior to men.
Because what I'm saying is the contraceptive mentality and the abortion mentality in our country, the lies that were being sold from the feminist movement, is that we have to have contraception to assure our freedom. That we have to have abortion in order to be free. That we have to have contraception in order to be free. That we have to suppress our natural bodies, our natural body functions in order to be equal to men. That very rhetoric says that we think we're inferior to men. And we're not. It's pro-lifers are like, no, we're not. We know we are equal to men, and like I said, we can argue we might be superior. Next question.
Hi. So you stated recently that after a few years of skepticism, and I know you said you served on President Trump's advisory board, but you stated in an op-ed recently in February that you've become a supporter. So I'm genuinely curious how you reconcile your pro-life beliefs with Donald Trump's broadly anti-life policies, including his policies of family separation, which resulted in the death of 2 children. I know you already said you don't support the Affordable Care Act, but that has saved many lives. His failure to act on gun legislation with mass shootings are killing people every day, and just his incendiary rhetoric, which has indirectly resulted in violence, for example, in Charlottesville last summer. So how do you reconcile your pro-life beliefs with his anti-life policy?
One point of clarification. So do you think that the children that are apprehended at the border that are in government, U.S. government care, whether it's a U.S. government agency or if it's a Catholic relief agency that's being contracted by the government, do you think like babies who are going to die should be resuscitated and be given care? Okay. Do you believe that like a baby who's born alive during an abortion in a Planned Parenthood should get care? What's the difference? No, my question is, what is the difference? No, because I'm going to answer. I'm going to answer your question. I wrote down your points, but I want to know from you, what is the difference? Why do you care about a mom who's made a dangerous journey through Mexico, through Central America, put her life, her child's life at risk? Why do you care that we should use taxpayer dollars? So say she crosses the border, her child's severely malnourished, and her child is dehydrated, right? For example, my son was in the hospital last week with severe acidosis because of dehydration and could have died. So she comes across the border and she has a baby in her arms that's dying, right? Should we pay for that child's health care?
Yes.
If a child is born alive during an abortion procedure, because sometimes the abortionist misses the heart when they're administering the digoxin, should the abortionist have to provide health care to that child? Why?
Because they're performing an abortion. So before that, they've already determined that it's not a baby. I know you're telling me that science has determined one thing, but
You just said they determined it's not a baby. How can an abortionist determine? How can an abortionist not determine it's not a baby? Excuse me, I'm dialoguing with her. How can an abortionist determine it's not a baby? Why is it not a baby? Is what I want you to tell me. Is why do you think it's not a baby?
You were just so concerned about everybody else asking, like waiting to ask questions, so I don't know why you're turning her on questions. You're supposed to leave.
Because I'm the boss of the situation. I'm the speaker. I'm a mom. I'm used to this. So why is it not a baby? Why don't you think it's a baby? But if it has been born, so if this baby comes out of utero and the digoxin hasn't been successful in inducing cardiac arrest, and this baby is alive.
well, first of all, I think that's a really rare question. Thank you. I think it's a really rare occasion. So I don't think it's all abortions, but
It is rare, but it does happen because a group of abortion survivors were just at the White House. So it does happen. So do you think it's a baby?
No.
Why is it not a baby?
Because if it can't survive outside the womb without help, and it's been determined for an abortion, it's not a baby.
But the child who's being crossed the border with his mother isn't going to survive without our help.
I'm just going to sub in for my roommate here because I feel really bad that she's having to have this conversation alone in front of everyone. I totally respect that you believe that life starts at conception and that's your belief.
Well, that's what science says.
that's what science says. Okay. I'm proudly pro-abortion, and I'm happy for you to believe that, and I'm proudly pro-abortion, I agree with Kathleen's statement, and I understand that this for you, it's the same thing as not supporting health care and humane treatment for children at the border. Me saying that a baby, I'll use the term baby because I know that's the term you would use it, a baby that was not, abortion is not successful, that was not come to an abortion should get medical care. But I don't really think you're answering her question, and I think she was really brave to come here and ask it. So I would like to know how you reconcile. So
Sure, no, I'm actually going to answer her question, but I actually wrote down the points.
Really bad because this is a really stressful situation, and I'm not a scientist, so I would be really stressed if someone was asking me to, describe how a fetus is or what a baby is. And
Well, I'm just saying, if you're advocating for legal abortion and you're saying that you're pro-abortion, then you should be able to talk about these things. And it is difficult to talk about, and it is stressful to talk about these things. So to go back to her question, so she's acknowledged that she thinks a child that's been taken into protective custody, U.S. border, should receive medical care, taxpayer-funded medical care, but a child who's born alive during a botched abortion should not receive medical care. That's what we've learned, which I think is actually really relevant to the argument that the rest of the room has heard this kind of philosophical discussion, because I think that shows the slippery slope here when we talk about abortion. So why don't pro-lifers care about children being apprehended at the border? Why don't pro-lifers care about health care for all? And if we're really pro-life, we would want all these things. I actually think, and I know why the pro-life movement was founded. The pro-life movement was founded to oppose abortion. We're an anti-abortion movement. We're anti-abortion. Now, while we agree, as pro-lifers would agree, of course, as common and decent human beings, 99% of Americans would agree, that children apprehended at the border deserve medical care, that human beings, Americans, deserve health care, that no one should die waiting for a surgery that they need. This isn't necessarily a cause the pro-life movement is going to take. The pro-life movement doesn't need and shouldn't take on 50 different issues. No one ever gets mad at the American Cancer Society for not investing money and time into fighting diabetes. Because we all know diabetes is bad and it kills, and cancer is bad and it kills. And those organizations have good goals, and sometimes they can work together, but most of the time they're doing their own fundraising, and they're all competing for dollars because they have important causes. No one ever says, oh man, those are the bastards at the American Cancer Society, don't care about cystic fibrosis. And man, if they really love people, they would talk about cystic fibrosis, or they would talk about heart disease. Even though we know these are all very important causes, and these are very important things that need our time and that need our money and our support. As a pro-life movement, we need to remain 100% focused 100% focused on the greatest human rights violation of our time, which is abortion. And I believe it deserves its own damn cause and its own movement, because that's how important this issue is. Now, pro-lifers, we can care about a lot of other issues. When I was in college, I was part of the Political Awareness Society and the Lions Club and all these other groups, because guess what? I'm a human person and I actually care about human beings. I wasn't just in the anti-abortion group. Nice sign. I wasn't just in the anti-abortion group. I was in other groups, right? Because I can care about other causes at the same time. You don't have this capacity to only care about one thing. And I think it's this crap fallacy we hear over and over again for the pro-choice, pro-abortion movement, that pro-lifers aren't really pro-life. They don't care. They don't care about women. Do you know what? I don't see the abortion movement, the feminist movement on college campuses with their pregnant and parenting initiative. It's the pro-life movement. It's my organization, Students for Life, who goes in and meets with administrators to say, hey, by the way, you just had a student told that she was going to lose her scholarship because she gave birth last month. It's pro-lifers who do that. It's our group that goes into college campuses and say, we need lactation rooms. We need diaper decks in the bathroom. It's not the feminist movement. In fact, on many campuses, when we have roundtables, guess who doesn't show up at the round table? So we actually do care. But we hear this over and over again. Why do we hear it? So you don't have to debate the real issue at stake. And that is, what is it? What is inside of her? Is it a unique, whole, living human being? Is it a person with rights? Or is it not? Next question.
Hi, my name is Erin Lyons. I'm a senior here, and I just want to thank you for coming. And like one of the women before me, I think it's really important that we have these conversations, whether or not we agree. I just think that these don't happen enough. And another thing, so I just want to make a quick comment on my question. So I am a senior here. I'm a double major. I am as educated as I could possibly be for being a 21-year-old at one of the most prestigious universities, which is really, really cool. And I'm also proudly on birth control, and it's not because I feel the need to suppress my own fertility. I want to be a mom one day. I want to have a family, and I think that's really, really special. But I just know that right now I am not physically, emotionally, mentally, any least prepared to create a life in a consensual sexual activity. But so my question is, you obviously want abortion to be illegal. And so when something is illegal, and someone goes against that and has an abortion, they break the law. And so that law, normally comes with consequences. And so what would you want, because making abortions illegal in full won't stop them from happening.
Sure.
They'll just be happening underground, and they'll be unsafe, and they'll have more repercussions than they do now. And so I just want to know what you have to say to the women who do have abortions, and should they be punished then? If a minor who's been sexually abused and raped and is now carrying her rapist child, should you tell that minor that she can't have an abortion? And if she does have one, then should she go to jail? A woman who is having severe health issues, and she brings her baby to term, and the mother herself could die, and she decides to end her pregnancy. Should she go to jail? So I just want to know what you have to say about, if it's illegal, then when someone has an abortion, because they still will, then what would you like to happen?
Sure. Well, there's a bunch of stuff we have to unpack there. One, I think the natural question is when you're saying, I'm proudly on birth control, but I'm just not ready to be a parent. I think that maybe it's a question is, are you ready to be in a sexual relationship then? I think that's something that we need to think about.
Have you ever had an orgasm?
Did I not say earlier this is the level of conversation we have? Did I ever have I have 4 children. I have lots of sex. Pro-lifers are totally covered on sex. But I think that's something when you say, I'm proudly on birth control, but I don't think I'm ready to be a mother. I think that's a question of, well, should you be having a consensual sexual relationship then? I think that's actually a question that you should ask yourself. Now, when you're talking about the legality of abortion, I think, this is a very good question. It's actually a question I've gotten asked probably a dozen times in the past 2 months, because the left is so terrified that Roe is going to be overturned. And so my next podcast is going to be on this subject, because it's something that people are questioning, and what's going to happen. And so when you look at what pro-lifers say for when Roe is overturned and when abortion will be made illegal, the question will be who will be punished for committing the illegal abortion. As with the United States pre-1973, pre-abortion legality, it will be the abortionist. It will be the person who's actually aborting another human being who will be punished and will be convicted for an abortion. It actually won't be women, and the pro-life movement is not arguing for women to be in prison, because we actually believe she is a second victim of the abortion industry and the lies that mainstream feminism has sold her, that she can't, that she's not strong enough and she's not powerful enough to succeed, to finish her education, to achieve her careers and be a mother. So that's actually not what the pro-life movement advocates. Now, the question about because you made something illegal, something's legal, somehow it's safe. There was actually more abortion deaths from legal abortions in 1972 than there were from illegal abortions in 1972, and that's from the Center for Disease Control's own statistics. We know from Planned Parenthood Their own medical director in 1962 stated that 90% of illegal abortions were being committed by physicians in good standing with their community. The abortion death rate actually severely dropped in the 40s and 50s because of the invention of penicillin, because most women, when they would die from an illegal abortion, would die from sepsis, from infection. The invention of penicillin and antibiotics, obviously, made the abortion death rate go way down. The 13th Amendment made slavery illegal, unconstitutional, right? Slavery still exists, newsflash. Slavery still exists in our country. It still exists in our world. We know that. But just because it still happens doesn't mean we legalize it to make it safe. It's still illegal, and we fight against slavery. But having the 13th Amendment has certainly declined the number of people who are enslaved in our country. Next question. Are we going to end this or are we going to go is the question I have. 10 more minutes. Okay, so next question. No, I'm sorry. There's a line. So.
To kind of echo what everyone is saying, thank you so much for coming and speaking. It's wonderful to have multiple opinions in one room to have a conversation about this. This week on campus is Care Week, and for us that means it's a week centered around raising awareness for sexual violence and what we can do to support survivors. I'm wearing this shirt, but I speak for me, not for any larger group of people. I guess I'm curious if you think abortion should be illegal. Are there any exceptions to that? Mainly, I'm thinking of victims of sexual violence. And you talked a lot about how abortion is an act of violence being committed against someone who maybe cannot defend themselves or is weaker than you are. But the same thing is happening to maybe create that life.
That's right.
How would you talk about that, and how would you suggest that we could support those victims of
Sure.
sexual violence?
We actually have a display at Students Life that we've toured on hundreds of college campuses called We Care. That's our tour. And it's about sexual assault. And how do we help victims of sexual assault? We give out rape whistles and consent cards. And one of the things we talk about is what happens in the rare circumstances that a woman who is sexually assaulted, who survives her sexual assault, becomes pregnant. And I think, to preface the conversation, and there might be sexual assault survivors here in the room, that I think that this is a very difficult subject, obviously, and it's, the worst thing to talk about. Like, it's not something, as you're talking about on campus, like, no one wants to talk about this. I have friends, my best friend went through this experience. It's horrific. And it's not something you would wish upon your worst enemy. Although, in the comments coming here, I had some people wishing it on me, but another day. I think when you look at a woman who has survived sexual assault, becomes impregnated by her assaulter, she has three choices. And it's to carry the child to term, which is an expensive commitment, something that she didn't sign up for, right? She wasn't engaging in consensual sex. She didn't, go into that sexual interaction knowing. It's an expensive commitment. And it's an emotional commitment too, right? To raise another human being, especially when you weren't prepared for that. She can choose abortion, which is, I believe, committing another act of violence. It actually propagates the cycle of violence. And then you also have she can choose adoption, which is a heroic, selfless act, but we know it's also emotionally painful, right? To carry a child to term and then to place that child with an adoptive family. And I think the rapist should be punished for all of that, because not only did he force herself on her sexually, not only did he violate her, he's also taken away this choice from her. He's forced her to become a mother, because she is a mother. Regardless of what decision she makes, she's a mom at this point, and she didn't sign up for that. But I do believe abortion in cases of rape are still wrong. Now, when we talk about pro-life laws and laws that are passed across the country that came up in the past question, most laws that are being introduced actually do have a rape, incest, life of the mother exception, which are about 3% of all abortions in the country. When I'm talking about abortion on campuses and events like this or a one-on-one, I often, life of the mother and rape always come up and always get asked about, using it to sort of justify abortion. And sometimes I just say, look, let's take it off the table. Let's say, fine, we'll have an exception for rape, incest, and life of the mother. Will you stand with me to oppose 97% of other abortions? and then the real feelings come out of, well, no. And so really what a lot of times, sadly, I think when rape is talked about on a campus environment like this, it's actually used to justify 100% of abortions. It's not actually a true question. But I do actually think you were being very sincere in your question, so thank you. So I look at it this way. So if a woman becomes pregnant from rape, she makes the courageous decision to parent her child. And she's in counseling. The rapist has been convicted. He's in jail. She gives birth, and she's on the road to healing. But say at like 2 years old, she has a baby boy, and say one day she looks at her son and just instantly like flashbacks of the rape, of the trauma she experienced occur. Like her son's his face has started to look like her rapist face, right? And every time she's looking at her son now, she's envisioning this rapist, and she's reliving the trauma that was forced upon her. She's having nightmares, whatever. And it gets so bad that she starts to have thoughts about killing him. Is she morally justified in killing her 2-year-old son?
No, but I think you're talking about two very different things. I think that...
Why is she not morally... Why can't she kill her? Why would you not be okay with her killing her 2-year-old son who's a product of rape?
Because at 2 years... I mean, obviously now you're getting down to whether I personally believe in abortion or not. Mm-hmm. And I do understand that was kind of the point of your question. In that, if shortly after experiencing sexual violence, she chooses to have an abortion, that child cannot survive outside of her womb. Whereas opposed to at 2 years old, he can survive with alternative parenting. I think that, again, this comes to the point of like whether I believe that you should be able to choose to have an abortion, and yes, I obviously do based on my answer to this question. But I think you're comparing apples and oranges. I think you're doing...
See, in the pro-life movement, it's not apples to oranges, because in the pro-life movement, you once were a toddler. You once were a fetus. You once were an embryo. You once were a zygote/fertilized egg, whatever you want to call it. You didn't come from those things. In the pro-life movement, what we maintain over and over again is that a human person, no matter what stage in life, no matter what the circumstances of their conception, they're a human person with rights. And their right to life is paramount. And that right shouldn't be violated. And when I said the 2-year-old, you all were like scoffing at me, right? Why would she say that? That's crazy. Because there's no difference between a 2-year-old and the pro-life movement. Those of us who are anti-abortion, we believe there is no difference between that 2-year-old child who's a product of rape, who was conceived in rape, and the fetus and the embryo that were conceived in rape. No matter what stage, that human person is a human person with rights. And I have friends who were conceived in rape, and they will tell you, I always was a person. I always was a person who had the right to life. So no, I don't think abortion in cases of rape should be allowed. I'm against that. And the pro-life movement, there's some people who will disagree, but most of us, we have to take this line. We have to take this line. And it's not a comfortable line to say, because I realize what we're saying for women who've survived a rape. I mean, it's hard enough to be a single mom. Like, when I was pregnant with my first 2 kids, and I was 23 and 24, I was married, but I took off my rings, my fingers kept swelling. Like, I would be walking in stores, and people would be looking at my stomach and then looking at my ring finger. And I was like a married woman. And I wasn't a victim of sexual assault. So I understand what the pro-life movement is saying is hard, and what we're asking for women is to be courageous and to be selfless. But philosophically, I can't be inconsistent. I can't say that a child in utero has rights, it has the right to live only based on their parents. Because if my dad goes out tomorrow and commits an act of terror, no one in the United States is going to, well, some people on Twitter, but most reasonable people aren't going to advocate that I should be killed as a result of my father's crimes. No one's going to say that. And so it's the same for a child in the womb. Thank you. Next question.
For your continuity.
Last question, okay.
I just want to thank you one last time. My question is about you, really. Like, how do you deal with all the disrespect and all the hate that you get, and how do you stay positive and so affirmed in your beliefs, and how can something like me do that too?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously hard, and I think within like the pro-life movement, anti-abortion movement, there's different roles for everyone, right? And you may not be somebody who envisions ever doing this, right? And this is, I mean, it's pretty interesting. Like, you're at the bottom, everyone's like at the top, and they're rolling their eyes and doing snaps. Like, it's intimidating to do it, right? But this is a conviction that I have on my heart, that I started volunteering at a pregnancy resource center when I was 15. I had like no idea what I was getting myself into, right? I was just like, yeah, I need summer internship hours. And the women at the center were phenomenal because they were like, no, we need you to counsel women. And I mean, I guess it's a shock to why I still have kids, because we never had the birds and bees talk in my house. I came from a very strict evangelical home. I don't think my mom and I have ever talked about sex ever. And I do it for a living. It's very odd. But like, you know, that first day, that first week in the pregnancy center, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is happening and nobody is talking about. Like, how can this be happening? Like, if abortions were happening on a street corner, if they were happening right in the middle of Harvard Yard and people saw what was happening, if you turned on your evening news every night and you saw the broken bodies of 2,700 little baby girls and baby boys that had been aborted that day, a lot of you would think differently about abortion. And you would be calling your legislators. You would be doing something. You'd be out in the streets demanding that we stop this injustice. But because we don't see it, because it's behind closed doors, because we sanitize and say, it's not pro-abortion, it's just pro-choice, it allows us not to think about it, right? So, I don't know. I'm extremely, let's say it a nice way, stubborn person. And I want to win, and I know. I've seen the science. I've met the victims of abortion. I've seen the victims of abortion. And I want to win, and I want to bring this home, and I'm not going to stop. So you just have to like tune out on the haters. I think a lot of times when we're on campuses and we're dialoguing, I'm not the best person on dialogue on campus because, as you can tell, I get like a little heated, and I've been told I'm intimidating, whatever. But what's interesting that we find on campuses, and when people come up to us and are like, fuck you, and they tear our displays down or rip up our crosses, well, what we know is most of those women and men are hurting. They're post-abortive, and us talking about abortion hurts their feelings. Because if we're saying abortion is bad, that hurts them, because they say, well, then you're saying I'm a bad person. And that's not what we're saying in the pro-life movement, because actually the pro-life movement's made up of thousands of men and women who are actually post-abortive, who've gone through this, and that's why they speak up. And so for me, what helps the most is knowing that most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, it's just ignorance, that they truly don't know. That if people really knew, if they understood in their hearts what abortion does, they would act differently. They would speak differently. And those who like, you know, they come out and curse you out and speak like at the Women's March and like bully us or whatever, those women, we knew they were post-abortive because there were these beautiful women like fur coats and like high heels, like well-to-do women acting like crazy people. And what would make you act like that if there's not some deep-seated psychological thing going on inside of you? So I think that's what helps me get through all of the crap that you get on social media and the negative comments and then, you know, the civil rights complaints and things like that, knowing that you're standing for justice. You're part of a human rights movement that's the largest human rights movement our world has ever known. No other cause in the history of the world turns out more people every year than the March for Life, than the pro-life March for Life. No cause in the history of the world turns out more people annually than the pro-life movement. We are the pro-life generation. The majority of our generation actually rejects abortion. So victory is coming, but we just have a lot of work to do, okay? Thank you all very much.